I don't think I really need to spend a long time on how bad things are in New South Wales at the moment and the situation that we're responding to as Action for Public Housing. Maybe a couple of things. So, you've probably seen the previous government sold more than $3.5 billion worth of public housing in a little over 10 years. That included more than 3,500 homes, as well as a bunch of other properties. Waiting list in New South Wales is over 55,000 households. It's probably somewhere in the vicinity of 100 to 120,000 people. Wait times 5 to 10 years for most types of housing in most places, and more than 10 years in a lot of places for a lot of types of homes. And by my count, and I've been following this pretty closely for the last 7 or 8 years, there have been more than 20 estates, public housing estates in New South Wales that have been redeveloped and at least partly privatised under both Coalition and Labor governments. And a lot of those reduced social housing, for counting social housing as both public and community, that, particularly actually what the Labor government was doing in the Campbelltown region around Ed's, Bradbury, Minto, Claymore and so on, reduced social housing after redevelopment by, sometimes around 40 or 50%. So, it's a bipartisan issue, as we've heard from other speakers. With a change of government, we've seen a couple of things change. So the Minns government announced the freeze on the privatisation of public housing, I think in March, or maybe May. That we quickly learned didn't extend to privatisation through redevelopment of estates, shamefully. But just, I guess, the auctioning off of individual homes and lots. In the most recent budget, there's been very, very meagre funding for new social housing, $70 million, fuck all really. $35 million for maintenance, which is just a drop in the ocean. We probably spent that in like a quarter of a day. And so there's a commitment to do, in addition to these things, a commitment to a public land audit for construction of housing that would be 30% social and affordable housing. I think that speaks to the issue. We've heard a lot about terminology today, but the conflation of social and affordable housing is a really big problem as well. The government at the moment, the Minns government, is talking about social and affordable housing being 30% of development on public land, 50% of the Waterloo estate redevelopment, 30% of the redevelopment of the Tolland estate in Wagga Wagga, as I was talking about with Virginia earlier. Social and affordable housing, community and public are very different things. Social and affordable are completely different things. So we need to just pierce through that rhetoric completely and not let them get away with that conflation. Because usually what it does is mask a reduction in social and in particular public housing. A couple of good news items that the government has abandoned plans to redevelop the Franklin Street estate in Glebe, which would have, and I think the shout out has to go out to Hands Off Glebe for this. Dennis Doherty, Hannah Middleton, Emily Bullock and co were really leading that campaign, Action for Public Housing assisting, and they managed to stop a development that would have demolished somewhere around 112 public homes and replace them with something like 120 public homes and a bunch of private units. So it's good that they have won that. The government has also abandoned plans to redevelop the Argyle estate in Coffs Harbour, which would have resulted in a similar kind of outcome, similar number of homes demolished, similar number rebuilt. So the government, the Minister Rose Jackson, is talking about not going ahead with estate redevelopment plans that only result in really marginal increase in social housing. And I think that's a good thing as partly a result of our campaigning, but it's clearly not what we've been fighting for, which is no more demolitions, retention, refurbishment, proper maintenance of public housing. So what we're talking about doing in the next, 12 months or so, there's kind of two things that Action for Public Housing does. One of them is fighting, I've been told I've got 1 minute to go, so the first thing, stopping redevelopment like Waterloo South. We're still campaigning for retention and refurbishment of that site. We're also working with Hands Off Glebe and Glebe to keep the complex at 82 Wentworth Park Road, and Hands Off Glebe met with Land Housing Corporation in the last week to discuss those plans, and I'm told that it's still in play, that a complex could be refurbished and infill developed at the rear. We also are talking about increasingly, fighting for places where public housing can be built. One of them, the state-led redevelopment of Blackwattle Bay, and I think also Wentworth Park with the Greyhound track lease coming up next year. That's an opportunity that we might want to think about fighting for the development of new public housing in addition to defending public housing. South Everleigh, also another opportunity. This is my second to last point, is another one where we might do something like a ballot. So getting a policy change where tenants actually get a vote in whether or not their homes are going to be demolished and rebuilt is something that we're going to explore. And finally, also maintenance campaign, as you've heard from several people today already. Maintenance is just shocking in public housing. Anybody who's lived there or worked with anybody who lives in public housing knows this. And I think that's a really big opportunity to get people who live in public housing more directly involved in the organising work, because this is an issue that speaks to them really directly and is in their day-to-day lives. So a quick plug, if you want to get involved, there's sign-up sheets at the back. Go to actionforpublichousing.org. You can see our, what do we call it, public housing watch, where we've mapped out all of the demolitions and many of the privatisation programs over the last 2 decades as well.